trying to intellectualize something desperately, and you're wasting your time. Never understand by that road.
What do you think you do understand by then? What can we understand
by? Your own feelings about things.
Hello book friends, welcome back to the channel. It's Alyssa. Hello if you are new. This video is brought to you by Sally Rooney. Or at least my Sally Rooney sweatshirt from girlparts.co. Get yours in the link below. That rhymed. Anyway, okay, hi. Enough being cheesy. This video, if you haven't noticed from the thumbnail, which makes this obvious, is about The Hearing Trumpet by Leonora Carrington, which I just finished at the very end of February, and I fell in love with this book. So I spent the morning today while I was preparing to film, writing down a lot of notes about this wonderful book. I'm going to link a lot of the creators that also did reviews that I have seen, like looked at, to help me kind of prepare for this below. So if you want more, if you want to hear from other people about this, you can go check out their videos. I didn't find a lot of people talking about this, and I think because it's not the kind of book that is for everybody, but I think when it's right for you, you're going to fall in love with it. So I need to go through so much with you all, so buckle up, get a snack, get a drink. Let's get into this review. So first off, let's talk about Leonora Carrington, because I knew nothing about her until I read this book. And I found this through, I was just watching a YouTube video, and it was a video from Katie James. I believe her name is James Katie or something like that here on YouTube. The way that she described this made me have to go pick it up, and I found the audiobook, which is phenomenal, by the way. So if you would like to listen to this, there is an audiobook and it is really well done, but it made me pick this up. So thank you to Katie James for talking about this. And thank you to all the other creators who have done reviews, because I felt like I was having a little mini book club watching your videos this morning. Like I was talking to you in my mind, which sounds like I'm crazy, but anyway. Let's do a little background on who Leonora Carrington is, because she is absolutely fascinating and I need more people to know who she is. So Leonora Carrington was born April 6, 1917. She died on May 25th, 2011. She was a British-born surrealist painter and novelist. She lived most of her adult life in Mexico City and was one of the last surviving members of the surrealist movement. And she was a founding member of the women's liberation movement in Mexico. She was born into a wealthy Roman Catholic family, and they didn't give her a lot of encouragement when it came to pursuing art, but she did find a patron in someone named Edward James, and they became a champion of her work in Britain. Eventually, she developed a name for herself and a relationship with fellow surrealist painter Max Ernst. Ernst separated from his wife and took up residence with Carrington in Paris shortly after they met. After the outbreak of World War II, Ernst was arrested first by the French and then by the Germans, and this was devastating for Leonora. She did move to Spain after his arrest with a friend, where she eventually suffered a nervous breakdown, and she was institutionalized in Spain. Her family made arrangements for her to be sent to a sanatorium in South Africa after that, but while she was en route, they stopped in Portugal, and she was able to escape, and she made her way to Mexico. She eventually had a marriage of convenience with a man named Renato Leduc. He was a poet and Mexican ambassador. It gave her diplomatic immunity, and this was all helped along and arranged with the help of Picasso, which I think is really interesting. Eventually, they did get divorced, and she ended up marrying a man named Americo Weiss. I think I said that all wrong, but they had two sons. Like one son, it sounds like, is a painter. The other one is a poet, so very artistic. She died at the age of 94 in a hospital in Mexico City from complications related to pneumonia. And she has one novel, a handful of short story collections or short stories, and a memoir that I just have to read. So that's the sort of TLDR from her Wikipedia page. And her art is absolutely stunning. I don't know how I've never seen these before, but I haven't. I need to see more. I would love to see some of these in person. I absolutely adore this. And this is one of the things I love about this sort of book community is the things we get exposed to. They can, I can find new favorites, new disappointments, and new people to sort of obsess over, new authors, creators, artists to go down a rabbit hole and learn more about. So this is definitely, ooh, I need more Leonora Carrington, especially after reading The Hearing Trumpet. So The Hearing Trumpet is a very surreal novel. It starts rather innocently enough with our main character and narrator, Marion, who is 92 years old, and she gets this hearing trumpet from her friend Carmela, and she is now able to overhear the conversations that her family members are having. And when she does that, she finds out that they're all talking about sending her away to a nursing home, essentially. She doesn't really know how to take all of this. She, according to herself, her biggest problems are that she kind of doesn't hear well, obviously, from the hearing trumpet, and she doesn't really have any teeth, so she has to eat certain foods. Otherwise, she's mostly fine. She can get around, she can do things, she does things every day. She has a cat, she has a chicken, she has things that she does. She's a fully functioning human being. She doesn't know why she has to be shipped off. She also doesn't seem to like her family very much, and her family doesn't necessarily seem very nice either, so I don't blame her. Her relationship with her friend Carmela is absolutely phenomenal. The two of them together are hilarious. I love it. Carmela is slightly younger than her. She's also has more money. Like, she is a little bit more independent in terms of wealth, which plays into some of the feminist commentary that I will talk about in a little bit. So she does get shipped off to this old person's home in Mexico. This is all set in Mexico, and it's run by this couple called the Gambits, and it's this religious home where they do all kinds of weird, like, self-actualizing and movements and all this stuff. It a lot of focus on like sins and greed and all this weird stuff. And the home only has old ladies, and they are quite a bunch of old ladies, and it's a very strange place. It is a bit like an abbey or a monastery or a castle, but also each woman lives in her own little building, and every little building is shaped differently. So you have somebody living in like a tower, somebody's living in a lighthouse, somebody's living in a cake. It's like slowly we start to descend into this dreamlike madness with lots of left turns that occur as the book progresses. It also has this feel of like the old BBC show called Waiting for God, where you have these like buffoons that run it that are really greedy, and these old people that are just kooky and quirky and up to all kinds of shenanigans. I kept thinking about that a lot while I was reading it, so I do love that show. Watch that show if you haven't. But anyway, in the dining hall at this institution, there is this giant portrait of a winking nun that becomes sort of an obsessive plot point for our main character, and a very important piece of the plot as it continues on. One of the important things about Marianne is that she self-admits that she sometimes can't tell the difference between waking and sleep and what is real and what is not. So as we descend into this more surreal world, as the book progresses, you start to question whether or not any of this is real, if this is a dream, if this is just a bizarre magical realism surrealist thing, like what exactly is happening. It is definitely a roller coaster. Is it her dementia? Is it her dreams? Like, what is it? There's a lot of questioning and unsettlingness in that piece of the narrative, but it's also funny and really interesting and quirky. But anyway, so this zany cast of characters eventually descends into this very strange dream world where this abbess kind of comes to life. They find out the backstory about her life. There is witchcraft and wolf girls and the like climate change apocalypse kind of stuff happening, and it's all incredibly fun and bizarre and so right up my alley. I think the polyglot reader does a much better job of summarizing the plot. It is quite a lot to summarize, but I really, that's that's the basics. I don't want to tell you everything because I think that there's a lot of twists and turns that I don't want you to miss. Now that we've talked about the plot, let's talk a little bit about what this may or may not actually be about. I opened this video with this little clip of Leonora saying, quote, "You're trying to intellectualize something that you can't." It's her talking about art. I think that's something that I felt often while reading this, is that I was trying to simultaneously enjoy the ride and find the greater meaning in the story. And there definitely is more in this, but I think that it is easy to get distracted with all of the twists and turns and zaniness and just absurd things that are happening as the plot goes on. But some of the big important takeaways of the hearing trumpet is this discussion of how we treat women in society, particularly elderly women, and how women don't start off being very valued, but we rapidly depreciate in value as we get older. One of the distinctions that Olga Tokarczuk makes in her afterword in the New York Review of Books edition is that Carmela, who is of a higher status and has more independence and wealth, she is able to hang on to more value as a woman simply because she has money, because money will always give you a leg up in a patriarchal society, even if you're a woman. And unfortunately for Marianne, she doesn't have that. So she is at the whim of her family at what they want to do with her, how she doesn't do anything, she doesn't contribute anything. She's essentially a useless old crone. When Marianne is listening in on her family members discussing sending her away to an institution, she overhears her grandson Robert saying, "Grandmother can hardly be classified as a human being. She is a drooling sack of decomposing flesh," which is quite a way to describe your grandmother, and I think very clearly shows the lack of value that women have in a patriarchal society, especially as they age. Everything is based on like beauty and looks and potentially money if you're someone like Carmela. But there's also a running commentary on how the church itself, as a patriarchal entity, also represses women and keeps women down. You can see that in the abbess, the nun. She becomes a very interesting figure and a very strange and bizarre plot point where you see kind of how she loses her power because of the church, and she feels like a very Lilith-like character. And you see that conflict between the more patriarchal church and the abbess. It feels like Leonora is making a lot of commentary on how a patriarchal society harms women. And then ultimately it feels like the overall message is that the only way to really change and confront patriarchy is a kind of complete overhaul, an apocalyptic like bubble bursting event where poles shift and it's a new world order. And that's how you're going to really reset. Like, you need a massive reset to shift society into a less patriarchal, a more matriarchal, perhaps a more just, more equal world. I'm going to read you a couple of things from the afterword from the NYRB edition. And we all know how terrible I am at reading out loud, but I'm going to do my best. I really love the discussion that Olga Tokarczuk has about this whole book in her afterword. And this particular passage, I think, really covers both points about church and just general society and womanhood. And I would beg you to remember why Miss Marple is such a infectious character and likable character and is so good at being Miss Marple, because she is somebody that the rest of society undervalues and overlooks. They don't see her as being able to be this cunning, intelligent, observant person who is solving crimes. She's just the old lady knitting in the corner. She's not a police officer. She's not a man. She's not she's not Poirot, like, she's just a little old lady. And so she gets really overlooked, and that's how she solves crimes. And Marianne has a very Miss Marple-like quality about her, where she's very observant of the world around her, but she's set in this incredibly like surreal setting. But anyway, Tokarczuk is talking about how women are often, what we like ends up becoming judged as being kitsch. And she says, kitschiness and lack of taste, a charge that is so often flung at women. Apparently, Joseph Conrad said that the best criterion for the quality of a book is that women don't like it, because women can only like bad literature. Let me tell you, as a woman who reviews books on the internet, that hit home real hard. Anyway, continuing on. All right, so be it. Kitschy is our ocean. All those cyclical processes, menstruation, and recurrent migraines, mumbo jumbo, healing herbs, and infantile trust in the power of nature. An unhealthy love of animals, sentimentality, the feeding of stray cats, being overprotective, poking one's nose into everything, all those flowers in little pots, all those little gardens, the hollyhocks, the rags, the lace, the stitching, the knitting, the romance novels, the soap operas, women's literature, emotionality, the accusation of mental weakness that has been pressed on us for centuries. The reservoir of misogynist scripts is immense and seemingly bottomless. In modern times, in a thoroughly patriarchal world, we can only talk about the goddess ironically, winking like the abbess in the painting that hangs in the Gambit's dining room, and with a hidden smirk, half serious, half mocking. Having been actively displaced and ridiculed for thousands of years, she can only express herself in this covert way. It's worth pondering how many subjects related to women's experiences have been marginalized, derided, ridiculed, and altogether displaced. For hundreds of years, women have been raised within misogynistic, patriarchal religions that openly discriminate against them to some degree. They take part in cultures that are never fully theirs, or that are even in outright opposition to them. From youth, women are drip-fed doctrines that position them as inferior, weaker, less capable, or in some other way handicapped. They grow up in a midst of ubiquitous misogyny, often veiled and not fully self-aware, which is intrinsic to culture, language, images, interpersonal relations, history, and economics. It is only in the last few decades that the real story of women, marginalized into near non-existence, has patiently tried to break free. And when it emerges into the appropriate world, it can find itself at a loss for words. That's the hearing trumpet, but with zaniness. She continues on later to say, in old age, a person becomes eccentric. This appears to be a natural law of development. Once adapting to society is no longer essential and the paths of the individual and the community start to diverge, perhaps old age is actually the one time in life when we can finally be ourselves without worrying about the demands of others or conforming to social norms that we have been constantly instructed to follow. At least the adolescent obligation to belong to one group or other ceases to apply. Thus, eccentricity is posited as a spontaneous, joyful rebellion against everything that's established and regarded as normal and self-evident. I think it's very important to realize that Marianne, though she loses value, and through that loss of value, she was able to sort of become her real self and blossom. These women in this home, they band together and they find themselves, and you see sort of the hidden depths and the ways each woman has their own quirks and powers, and they're not just little old grannies that take up space and are like sagging bones and drooling toothless whatever biddies that Robert called them, right? They have more to them. And I think that idea of though society is saying that you have less value as you get older, there is this freedom in that having less value and being pushed to the sidelines and being less observed because you have less value, that suddenly you can do whatever you want. I think that that is something that as I get older, that I'm almost looking forward to, that moment where I get to be as eccentric as I want to be, because nobody is going to push back on me in the way that they would have if I had done that in my teens, in my 20s. So there is this sort of freeing nature of being outside of the confines of societal obligation. But at the same time, you have to suffer through years of being under that societal obligation, that patriarchy, that the demeaning of literally everything you find joy in because it's kitschy and girly, before you can truly just let go and be free. I really loved how you could read this in two different ways. You could take that, like I said, surface level ride and lock in and just enjoy the zaniness. And then you can go back and you can dig deeper and you can dissect different pieces of it and see where Carrington is trying to say more. And it's not just about a zany descent into a surrealist painting. It is also commentary on patriarchy and is highly feminist and is a remarkably well told story. I found it addictive. I absolutely adored it, clearly, because I'm here gushing about it. And I think it's the kind of thing that you can read over and over again and find something new, some new little piece that you can dissect, or some little quirk that you missed on a past read. And I love books that are almost timeless like that. Like, you kind of reset almost every time you read it. One of the greatest strengths in this is its humor. I truthfully enjoyed how it kept taking left turn after left turn after left turn after left turn. I didn't get tired of it. I think that also came as a function of the fact that I didn't read this in one sitting. I would not suggest that you do. I suggest that you take this in chunks and kind of go through it slowly, because it can become very overwhelming if with it is a lot of absurdity, it is a lot of surrealism. It is a lot, but I think if you do it in chunks and you like almost little installments of what is going on with Marianne today, and you read a little bit and then you're like, well, that was kooky, and then you put it down. I think that's kind of the best way, in my opinion, to read this, so you don't get overwhelmed. It does read like a grown-up Alice in Wonderland, which I adore. It reminded me a lot of Orlando, We Spread, which is dealing with an older patient that is you're very unsettled, and it's much darker than this, but it has a lot of that what is real, like you cannot tangibly understand what is maybe dementia and what is reality. And of course, Master and Margarita, something like that, with the bonkers zaniness of it all. I do think that if you like any and all of those, you may like this. And I just found Marianne really funny in the sense that she reminds me of a lot of dementia patients that I've met, where they have just enough of a grasp on reality that they trick you and you sort of feel like they are completely alert and oriented. And then suddenly they're talking to you about a cat that's not there and only they know is there, and you're like, oh right, you tricked me. No, you really do have dementia. You almost got me. I thought you knew where you were and what was going on, but I'm just going to read you what I wrote while I was working through that thought in my notes. It says, but honestly, what really is senility? Who decides reality? Surely reality is a matter of perspective. And I think that's a big piece of what is going on in the ramping up of this surrealist plot as you continue on through The Hearing Trumpet. We need to wrap this up. I think it's really interesting something that Heather Reed said about this, and that is she felt like this may be an homage to Virginia Woolf, which I think is just a very interesting thing to walk away with from this. And I can see what she sees, and it would kind of be nice to know that maybe she is paying a little homage to Virginia Woolf in all of this. There are definitely, like I've said, correlations between this and Orlando in terms of the bendy nature of things and the like expansive timeline of it. You know, people seem to be able to live forever in some ways. So there could be some piece of this that's also an homage to Virginia Woolf. People keep calling this magical realism, and I don't fully know if I like putting it in that genre. I don't know if this is magical realism. I'm also not very good at understanding what magical realism is, because it's a little different between like Latin American magical realism and other magical realism. And like it could be magical realism, but it also feels like a genre on its own. It feels like the dictation of a surrealist painting. If you had to put one of her paintings into words, this is what it would read like. And I don't know if that really makes it magical realism, but like for lack of a better term, I guess this is magical realism. So if that's something you don't like, perhaps avoid this, but if you enjoy the absurd and the surreal, I would definitely pick this up. But at the end of the day, I feel like this is a feminist text unlike any other I've read before, and I need to know more. I think she has led a very interesting life. I'm sure her memoir is zany and heartbreaking and fascinating, and I would love to read some of her short stories as well. And if anybody knows of any exhibitions of her work that may be occurring in New York, please let me know, because I would love to see some of her art up close and personal, because it's gorgeous. And yeah, that's it. This has gone on for entirely too long. I hope I've somehow convinced you to perhaps read this book. If not, well, thank you for watching. If you have read The Hearing Trumpet, please let me know down below. Give me your thoughts on it. Otherwise, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want, like talk for 30 minutes about one book. Goodbye.
So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry. I don't think I ever wanna go come closer next to me, trying to find another way to say